General quarters. All hands man your battle stations.
Welcome to WETSU, a Battleship New Jersey podcast. My name is Marshall Spevak, and I'm honored and privileged to be the CEO of the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial and the host of this podcast. We're joined today by a very special guest on board the Battleship New Jersey, Bill Brown. Bill served honorably in the United States Navy in 1990s and 2000s, graduating from Bud's Class 231 and serving on SEAL Team 8, including a deployment to Iraq. After retiring from the Navy, he went to Rutgers University and Law School, and he served as president of the Veterans Alumni of Rutgers University. He's now a partner at the Patriotic law firm. His partner, Tim, is also a retired Navy surface warfare officer and even got married right here on the Battleship New Jersey. Last but certainly not least, Bill is the founder, event chair, and lead SEAL for the New York City SEAL Swim. Bill, welcome to the podcast, and thanks very much for being here.
Marshall, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for teaching our youth about the Battleship New Jersey, the most decorated battleship in American history, teaching our youth about patriotism. I think that's extremely important endeavors, and I'm grateful.
Thank you. That's exactly why we do what we do here. You joined the Navy. You went through BUDS, your Navy SEAL. First and foremost, thank you for your service. Between TV shows, movies, BUDS gets a lot of hype and a lot of screen time, but you are someone who lived it. Can you tell us your biggest takeaways and what it was like for you?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is the guys I served with. Without a doubt, I think that's the greatest gift from being in the SEAL community. Really raised my expectations and boundaries that I had set for myself. Number one, gave me responsibility. Number two, I got to see the world. And number three, when you work with a lot of talented and dedicated, people, similar to kind of being in law school or at a really good law firm, it's absolutely there's a certain stress to it. But at the same time, that stress is a gift because it's going to mold you and it's going to change you in real positive ways. So 100%, that's the greatest takeaway to being a SEAL. Another beautiful thing is the truth is I've seen some horror, and the truth is I helped hold some people, some terrorists accountable. So that is a beautiful thing, and I'm very grateful, 100%.
Bill, you joined SEAL Team 8 prior to the attack on 9/11. Where were you when you heard the news? How quickly did you know we were about to go to war? And how did you switch that mindset from, we are under attack or at war, from, joining the Navy, joining the SEAL community when, we were at a time of peace?
It's kind of funny sometimes how fate kind of guides you. I was kind of born with a cleft palate, so I was kind of really, and even now, normally, and depending on the atmosphere, pretty low profile. My biggest fear was reading out loud in class. When I was going through training and SEAL qualification training, and then once I got into my SEAL team and I was going through some training there, they saw that I was kind of low profile a little bit. And one of the things they did was they actually made me a comm guy. And all my platoons, I was a comm guy. And to be sincere with you, the biggest weapon is the radio. Because no matter what the situation is, you're calling in bigger weapons, you're calling for extracts, like you're giving intel, you're getting intel. And so one of the things that forced me to do is, number one was, before any training exercise or any op, there's always a comm plan. And so initially I would have preset, I'd have to know the training exercise or the op pretty thoroughly because I have to brief the different phases of the comm plans to everybody. There was a lot of tough love there. And the second thing was that I actually, afterwards, I had to give a debrief too. And it's kind of interesting because that type of similar experience later on in life, when I became a veterans advocate at an undergrad at Rutgers, and I founded Veterans for Education, there used to be a state senator who became a congressman named John Adler. and me and John Adler became friends. And he was a proponent of veterans. And, there's a few times I got to appear on some press conferences with him. And that had an impact on me too, because that made me more comfortable in front of cameras. And one of the things I learned, and it's similar to being an attorney, is if I know the facts and I believe in it, I normally don't have a hard time expressing myself. But that started when I was a young SEAL, and I was actually going through training for some outdated technology where we used to basically be a kind of like Morse code, send out blueprints of floor plans for different buildings, different structures. And I was going through that course, and all the other comm guys in my SEAL team at SEAL Team 8, a lot of the younger guys like me, we were in a similar type of course in a room similar to this, which is it's pretty amazing where we are right now on the Battleship New Jersey. But so I was going through that course, and back then a lot of the SEALs had beepers, and I was what you would call FNG, a new guy, and I was with some other new guys in the course, and the instructors their beepers went off, and then they came back and they told us to go to our platoon huts. Now each SEAL team is divided has a various number of platoons, and we all have our little area, our space, and we call that a platoon hut. So I went up to my platoon hut, and the way the SEAL workups is the older guys come home, they'll either go to schools or they'll go on vacation. The younger guys, the new guys like me, we're not going on vacation. We're trying to pick up as many qualifications as we can. So we're taking various courses. I was taking this kind of comms course. So I go up there, there's a couple other new guys like me, and then there's two older guys there. And they got the TV on, and you see that one of the planes hit one of the towers, and we're all like, and then when the second one hit, there was no doubt that our life had changed. And of course, the older guys, their beepers started going off, and so it was, that was a life-changing moment.
Well, we certainly appreciate good comms guys here on the Battleship. You mentioned calling in for for the bigger guns, and that was very often what happened here on the Battleship, whether it was Marines in the jungle in Vietnam or in Beirut when the Battleship was stationed off Beirut in Lebanon during the Civil War there. That was very often getting those calls and delivering that firepower. That was from the 16-inch guns and the 5-inch mounts. That was very often a big part of what the Battleship did in combat. So we certainly appreciate good comms guys. After 9/11, you participated in a JTAC warm-up bombing exercise of Navy air assets in Albania. This was right before the shock and awe campaign. Can you tell us sort of what you witnessed there? What was that like, and if for whatever your role in that was?
Sure. So that was during my first SEAL deployment. And one of the things, initially what we were doing is our primary objective was something they call VBSS, Visit, Board, Search, and Seize. And at the time, they had basically an embargo against Iraq. So different cargo ships going from A to B that got targeted, we would search and board. And so that was kind of the primary thing that we were doing out there and we were basically hovering around the Mediterranean. And we were working off a ship that's now decommissioned called the USS LaSalle. And it was a command ship, and it was like I believe an LSU that had been severely upgraded, where the back of the ship that would go into the water was actually welded shut. And it was actually command center. It was kind of interesting because some of the things that happened there, but they flew me on a helicopter to an aircraft carrier, and then another helicopter. And I got with some other SEAL communicators. And one of my quals at that time is I was a joint terminal air controller, which basically, and I was a forward air ground controller, and I was a spec op spotter. So I was trained to call on airstrikes and Navy gunfire as well. but they flew us out to a bombing range. And for about 2 weeks, we were camped out there, and they had some other SEALs like me. And basically what they were doing, what I consider myself there, was I was almost like a pitcher that's getting ready to go in, like the warm-up catcher that's warming up that pitcher. And so basically we're keeping these Navy air assets and these pilots warmed up, and they would come in and they do live runs and some hot runs on this bombing range in Albania. And it was kind of interesting to be there because they had a lot of these like World War II pillboxes and things like that there. So there was some history there. But yeah, and one of the things that was interesting after that, because we spent about 2 weeks there intense doing that, and they would come periodically. And then what happened was I wound up finding myself back in the USS LaSalle. And one of the things there that was kind of neat was right when shock and all happened, the battle group that we were with, I was a SEAL, so I could go up on the deck and no one was going to bother us. And so I'm up on the deck and they were shooting these tomahawks into Iraq. And one of the kind of cool things about it was the first part, it's all, you can see it. It's reminds me of like shooting up a flare. You could see it. And it was kind of neat because they would shoot. And then I could see as like the ships next to me, as the one that would shoot, let's say this one shot, all of a sudden the other ships by it would kind of, because of the aftershock, it would kind of go back a little bit. And it was kind of neat. And then they were like tagging, like boom, 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 boom. And it was kind of cool because then I could go downstairs to this joint command center that they had, and they had all these screens up there, and it's something you would think kind of out of a movie. Yeah. And I could see where they were selecting different military targets, especially in Baghdad. And later on, when I was in Iraq, I got to see like they hit it pretty hard. And I think a lot of people, if you ever seen old like black and white pictures of like Burnout Berlin, or Frankfurt. That's what it looked like, where you would have like the steel frames and the concrete behind it, and a lot of rubble to some pretty massive buildings. And so I saw that in Baghdad, and I spent some time in the Najaf later on, and that got hit pretty hard too.
You mentioned the LaSalle, which I looked up and actually happened to be the flagship of the U.S. Sixth Fleet at the time that you were on there. So as you were saying, a lot of command, probably some admirals and stuff on board. You mentioned an aircraft carrier. We're here on the battleship. What did you enjoy, not enjoy about any of your time in the Navy, having served on surface ships?
Well, one of the things right away that's I never realized what real hard work was. When I saw those sailors and guys and gals in the engine room that would literally sometimes not see the light of day for a long time, and they're working like 12-hour shifts. Some of them are sharing racks, and they are working. And so the number one thing, and I think that's a great skill set for men and women who join the military, especially if you're going to the Navy, you're going to learn how to work. And I think that's one of the great things because it builds this sense of work ethic that you just become accustomed to. So one, I had a great deal of respect. There was no like BS. These men and women, they were young sailors, man, but they were busting their ass hard all the time. So I had a great deal of respect for them. The other things, it's a city. It's like a floating city out there. And I know like the first time I was on an aircraft carrier, I was a young, aggressive, cocky SEAL. I'm on this aircraft carrier and we just got off, we just land, and I like just start walking, and then like I don't know, 50 people start screaming at me because in an aircraft carrier, you can't mess around. They got a catapult system there.
Right.
Like you can get decapitated real fast. And so, one of the other things I realized is like listen and follow directions real fast. And I think that's the right way to be.
Yeah, I mean, that perfectly describes the name of this podcast, WETSU, which was the motto of Captain Tucker, our last CO, we eat this stuff up, or something more vulgar than that, doing hard work and doing it with a smile on your face, certainly fits the bill of what you just said, and certainly of being a Navy SEAL and of your community. You got to Iraq. You did a stint as part of the Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister's protective security detail.
That's right.
At that time, correct me if I'm wrong, SEALs were in charge of a lot of protective details for some of the top leaders of Iraq after the invasion, and when the transitional and coalition government was coming together. Was that something you were expecting to do before you got there? Did you enjoy it? And sort of what was sort of the day in the life of protecting somebody of that magnitude in a war zone? And you previously said, and trying to do it while you're always on the X.
Right.
So yeah, I'd love to just hear about that.
Well, the first part is they don't tell you right off where you're going. You kind of figure it out by the different type of training you're going through. Like first, all of a sudden, we're doing a lot of desert warfare training and like out at, in different places in deserts. And then the next thing happens is, we're doing some training for, they call it PSD, personal security detail. And it's pretty high speed, intensive type of stuff. Things that would likely be, Secret Service agents might go through. And, you're learning how to do, they call it offensive driving and things like that. And so they don't tell you per se, but, you figure it out.
Right. And
so you figure it out, we kind of figured out. And then they basically, shortly before you deploy, they kind of tell you, who you're being assigned to. The other thing was, it's even a quicker pickup because the SEAL community is really small, and we have friends all over. Yeah. We knew that SEALs refer to themselves as team guys. We knew that team guys guarded the top 4 dignitaries in Iraq and Afghanistan during that time. So we pretty much kind of honed in on what was going on. But one of the things was it's different. SEALs we're better when we feel better when we're offensive, when you're out hunting bad guys. Like that's what gets me excited.
Right.
When you're basically trying to reduce risk in a extremely high risk environment, you're on the X, you're a big target. So your situation, it's much different. I think it's a higher threshold. And so for us, that's really what it was about. One was you understood that your mission, when you would think it, I was a teammate guy. And in the Spec Ops community, they kind of refer to us as vanilla SEALs. And then they would refer to like the Team 6 guys or Delta Force guys as like Tier 1, operators. But this was absolutely a Tier 1 op when you think about how important it was to protect 4 dignitaries at the time when they were trying to reestablish an interim government.
Right.
And so one was, I think we all understood the importance of the mission. 2 was, I think, for me to be sincere, there was an internal struggle. I didn't initially sign up to basically be putting my life on the line for an Iraqi politician.
Sure.
One of the things about our guy that we had, Burnham Salah, was he was a Kurdish guy. He was hiding out in London for a while, came back. He was an intellectual. Now we all talk, right? And so we knew kind of like the bio and the background of everybody who was a dignitary that we regarded. And so some of the guys we had zero respect for at least for me personally. I kind of respected what this guy was about. He was an intellectual that was really trying to, in my opinion, make a better difference. And there were times when, like, a lot of times some of the things that were made it a difficult situation is he would put himself, and I would think, a little more out at risk than he should. And he tried to visit different reconstruction projects. He tried to visit real leaders out there, very involved people in the oil and petroleum industry. And they have little militias in different cities over there, and in some cities, several. And so it kind of reminds me of gang warfare. It's real tribalism. And so, you go to a different neighborhood, the atmosphere can change very quickly. And in the area we were at, it was semi-protected. There was a checkpoint by this militia. It was still in an urban area in Baghdad. And instead of us rolling in deep with our convoy, the guy wants to get out and walk. And it's, we didn't clear any of these buildings. And, but he wanted to make a statement, to these key players in the huge cornerstone industry over there, that basically, in my opinion, he was kind of indicating that he was his own man. But he absolutely put himself at risk. And he put himself at risk, too. I remember a couple times where he'd have almost reminds me of a Chris Christie town hall, where you'd have a room full of people who had a lot of concerns. And the security aspect, it made it pretty difficult because this is a lot different high-risk atmosphere than New Jersey. That was, I'm
assuming at that time, unlike a Secret Service detail or something you're not doing advanced work. You don't have guys out before you get there.
Well, it depends. Try to do advanced work all the time. And I was RNS and reconnaissance surveillance. And I did several of those RNSs. And I remember had a debate, one of these kind of militia guys. And it was in Simawar, Iraq. I might be mistaken. But what happened was this guy's saying, and this is just me and a couple other guys, we got an interpreter, but basically you got a warlord. And he said, I got security. Don't worry. I said, no, we have. I didn't say this because I was just a shooter. But, the guy that was representing us said, no, we got security, and basically he's saying, no, we're SEALs. We're going to protect the principle, and that's it. We're not giving it over to anybody because that's our mentality. But so we had to go through various spots, and it became very clear who had security, because I would say it's probably maybe 10 miles. I don't know if it's 10 miles, but in some areas we had to cross a little bit of desert to get to some other area. And I'd say every, I don't know, quarter mile, maybe less than that, he would have two guys with machine guns on each side of the road the entire route. It became very clear who had security. It guy was a militia warlord, and there was different times. I remember in the JOF, I was doing the RNS, and in this case, I was working with another SEAL, a renowned SEAL within the community named Stephen Redbow, and for a while he had the most confirmed sniper kills. But he was a Sioux Indian, so he kind of looked. He could kind of pass on a quick glance. And we weren't wearing U.S. military gear.
Right.
I'm pretty, white, proud American, And so one of the things that happened was another militia, basically at the time the governor of Rajab, he basically had a convoy, and in a Toyota in front of us, they had a bunch of guys with AKs and a loudspeaker. And then we're in the second vehicle, and we got two Iraqi nationals that don't speak English that well in front. And it was weird because this was Najaf. If you're a Shiite Muslim, Najaf is a very holy city for you. And it's not too far from Iran. It's in southern Iraq. And if you're a Shiite Muslim, you want to be buried there. And this is in 2004. Shortly thereafter, there was a huge firefight with the Mutakar al-Sadr army. And basically, he ran into the Ali Iman shrine and hid out. And so our guy wants to meet with al-Sistani, who's the big religious leader for the Shiite Muslims and the de facto real ruler for Shiite Muslims in Iraq. So he wants to meet with them. And one of the things we were doing was we were scouting out the different areas and trying to determine what our route was. And so I can't believe we agreed to this, but they agreed that we couldn't bring long rifles. So I can't bring a long rifle. I'm in there, and one of the things, they'll butcher animals right off the side of the road. And and I remember we're stopped at this this circle, and they're butchering some animals, and there's a crowd of people, and then they see me, right? Because the windows are down. And so it's a sketch moment, and I had a grenade, and I kind of just flashed my grenade like this to the crowd, and I kind of just let them know it's not going to go good. And what happened is the guys in the front, they got their AKs, and they start shooting up in the air, and they making a bunch of noise, clearing out the crowd. And so that's one of the things we did with that RNS. And what we were doing there is we're basically getting GPS spots of coordinates in case later on we get rolled up. And then later after that, when we came back, the mayor of Najaf actually had it. He kind of respected me and Redmond so much that he actually had a meal with us. Right? And I got the picture. I got the mayor of Najaf at the time. And what people can't see in the picture is I actually got a grenade and my pistol on each leg. And I know at one point the passenger guy in that car, he holstered around, and it wouldn't have went good for him if he tried to turn around. But I mean, there are a couple incidents like that where you're way out when you're a SEAL, way out there. And I had a couple of those type of situations. But later on, I did a RNS with the Marines there because they had a fob outside there, and that's another type of. I'm not going to go too much into what happened here, but the way the Iraqis, the Deputy Prime Minister and his crew, is we coordinated a route and different individuals they were supposed to meet with. But what happened is all of a sudden they change it up. And so I'm running a QRF, a quick reactionary force, with a bunch of Marines. And one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to have a big footprint. So I'm off at, a couple blocks away, right? But I would stage and one of the things that they're at one point, because, we got our PSD guys there, I'd go advance to the next point. But once they started changing the order around, shuffling the deck, what I had to do is I said, all right, where predominantly are the majority of our spots? And I kind of positioned myself as in a spoke wheel in the center. All right. And that way I can't, because you can't keep playing catch up there, because one of the things people don't realize is there was a huge battle there. And one of the things the insurgents did is they would make all this rubble and debris, and they'd block up these roads. And we were using a GPS system at the time called Falcon View. Now, sometimes we would have AC-130s guiding us overhead. At this particular day, we did. And so we're kind of going blind off Falcon View, but you can't really read Falcon View because it's not giving you up-to-date information. Like this road is barricaded up, you can't go. And that's a sketchy situation, because what happens is that's a prime spot to get ambushed. So, and sometimes you had to almost like pick up basketball. You had to make decisions, the best tactical decisions you can at certain times. But so that kind of explains some of the complications with doing PSD at a high level and in such a high risk atmosphere. But one of the things the SEAL teams did is they realized that, and one of the things, it's almost like recess, is they would let us kind of move us in and work. I did a lot of ops where I worked with other units, like the Army. I did some stuff with the Japanese. I did some stuff with I think it was the Norwegians, like other outfits. And and so that you'd wind up doing snatch and grab operations where you grab high ranking insurgents, or I did some sniper ops. Not that I was a sniper, but because I was a JTAC and I was a breacher, and so it made me valuable on those operations, just on that side of things.
you just mentioned it. Some of the other missions that you participated in during your time in Iraq. Anything in particular that stands out to you?
Well, I was a first responder to 2 suicide bombings. Shortly thereafter, when I was in Iraq in 2004, the first time the Green Zone got hit, we were going to the Steel Dragon, which is a forward operating base that got hit. And I was actually, me and another team guy were trying to intercept the second suicide bomber who bypassed the hospital and went high order in a bazaar. And so that shook me up a little bit. But what I saw there was horror at the closest level, you know. And so that I didn't know about the ins and outs of the political things, but I did know that there was real evil there, and that needed to be checked. And so I felt honored to participate in some of those sniper and snatch and grab ops, and literally, you know, grabbing these guys out in the middle of the night. You know, they got the weapons caches. There's no doubt they're bad guys. Zip tying them up, masking them up, stacking them head to toe in the back of Humvee, dropping them off to the CIA. So I felt proud, and I'm honored to have participated in some of those.
Deck of cards back in the day, right, with the names and the faces. Yeah,
yeah. I didn't have the chance to take out any of those guys. I was on we were on basically. We got stood down to do a hit on Zalkawi. And one of the things that happened was it was the first time we were going to do a daytime like that. And actually, one of the things that happened here was I was pretty excited about it because I knew it would have been a historical operation. There was a compound and they had some UAVs doing wagon wheels overhead, and it was definitely bad guys on scene, 100%. But their GO criteria was a little odd because their GO criteria was basically they stated that they knew it was Zalkawi because he would arrive in a convoy of white Suburbans. I thought that would be really odd because that's just like, hey, like, please come and get me type of signal. But we were all geared up to go, and I was fired up for it. But actually, we were kind of in my platoon. We were kind of circled up, kind of talking about, you know, hashing it out, like, you know, what we would do. And one of the things, and I was a breacher too, so one of the things we were talking about was we knew there was bad guys on scene, and a lot of these compounds and buildings in the Middle East, they have these walls in front of them. And then a lot of times they have these double like doors that you could get in. And so a lot of our Humvees, we'd have tires up front and we just ran through. But most of the time, actually, I never did an op like that, but some were. The stuff that I did, basically, we stopped like a little up the block and then roll it. And one of the things that would happen was the talk was we would do a diversionary charge. And so we would hit a charge in the back, and then we would have these little ladders and come over there, basically the wall. And there was a guy in my platoon who was a Marine, and then after 9/11 came in, became a SEAL, and he was an investment banker. So he was a servant guy, and he had Kurds. And one of the things he did, because it's one thing to when you're with a bunch of guys who want to get at it, to kind of put like a, hey, like when a reconsider type of flag up, 100% takes Kurds. And one of the things he said, hey, if we go over this wall, some of us are going to get pinged. And I supported the other side, and I was wrong. And this is just a verbal thing. And I was like, hey, we got a C-130 up ahead. We're going to do diversion charge. He's like, no. He's like, we're all geared up like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You got your vest. I got a big radio on my back. He's like, not all of us some of us are going to get shot coming out there. And he was right. And so, like, I don't know if that's the reason why we wound up getting stand down on not op or not, but we definitely reconsidered how we were going to insert. And that was because somebody had the courage to stand up and say, hey, hold on a minute, something's wrong here. And that had an impact on me. I think that had a big impact on me. And I think, also the fact that I was unsuccessful in intercepting that second suicide bomber, I think that had a big impact on me, and why sometimes I feel compelled to kind of stand up.
I appreciate you sharing that. You got out of the Navy, you went to college, to law school. You started a veterans alumni group, Veterans for Education, as you mentioned before. Your motto is, and it's on the signature of every email, if veterans don't look out for each other, no one will. Part of the thing that we're doing here on this podcast, aside from talking to individuals associated with the battleship, former crew members, et cetera, is, to try to highlight some of our active duty military leadership in the state, as well as leaders in our veterans community. I wanted to talk about one thing in particular. You ran 65 miles in between two Rutgers campuses, the New Brunswick campus and the Newark campus.
Yeah.
And at that time, your Veterans for Education group, and you renamed it Jeremy from Cherry Hill, a Marine Lance Corporal, was killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. You got to know him as a Rutgers student. I knew him growing up. His brother, Ben, actually serves on our crew here as our collections manager in our curatorial department. Can you tell us why you're on the 65 miles and some of the significance, what you place significance on in terms of veterans helping other veterans and why that's important?
Right. Well, I founded the Veterans for Education group. I think it's important to do the best I can to be accurate. There was a Rutgers Marine Vietnam veteran named Bill Meade, who founded the Veterans Alumni of Rutgers University, who I later on became president. Regarding the run for the 65-mile run for Rutgers Camden and Rutgers New Brunswick, I had the honor to serve with David Goggins, who was a famous SEAL. I'm in both of his books, extensively in the book Can't Hurt Me, in a chapter titled Taken Souls. We went through hell week together. We actually did our first direct action mission in Iraq. It was me, Dave, and another renowned SEAL named Mikel Vega. He's an actor. He's been like G.I. Joe, Transformers. He actually led the prayer. So David Goggins, I got out. I was having a tough transition. Had a real hard time getting a job. One of the things that the Navy taught me really good work ethic. So I just didn't feel right not doing anything. So I kind of started going to school. And for a short period of my life, I fell in love with learning. While I was doing that, I got involved in veterans advocacy. Some of that had a big influence. John Adler actually organized a congressional debate between John Adler and his congressional opponent, Michael Myers.
Chris Myers, yep. Mm-hmm.
Who was a Navy veteran and executive director at Lockheed Martin before a huge scandal. But one of the things...
That's where we met for the first time. You mentioned John Adler, the late John Adler, who was a mentor of mine as well. I'll never forget when I met you, actually. John was having a town hall, and all of a sudden, there was a bunch of guys in suits and ties who walked around right towards the back of the room, yep. Very quiet, didn't say a word. And we all turned around and like, who are these guys? And, it was very clear you were all military guys. But sorry, I divert, but I wanted to mention that.
He was a great guy. And, that advocacy was really kind of influenced by some of the stuff when I was a SEAL. Because, I remember, the CIA coming in late at night, and all of a sudden, I had to get the DPM. And the bodyguards for the CIA were previous team guys, And, seeing how those guys operate, and even some of the things we did and some of the individuals we tried to take off the chessboard were decision makers and force multipliers, in my opinion. And so with my advocacy, that's one of the things I always tried to ambush decision makers. And, John Adler was at a BFW campaigning, got a bunch of veterans. He's kind of in my environment a little bit. I ambushed him, and he took it well. But, yeah, so with the
our former governor, maybe not so much.
Well, the same thing with him. We talk about the battleship. The battleship it was out there. It was a force. It was a force, and it was supporting other Navy military service personnel. It was going out there to change things and set a precedence. And I think sometimes that's what good men and women have to do. So. Even the same thing when I sniped out Chris Christie, I did research on him. I knew that if I had a good feeling that if he called on me, and I had a feeling he would, because the Republican Party in Burlington at the time did not like me. And I figured he might just bite the bait. So, but in my point with the 65-mile run, when you serve with guys like David Goggins, and by the way, Chris Kyle is in my boat crew too. So imagine Chris Kyle and David Goggins in your boat crew going through some of the hardest military training in the world. Like, if you're around those type of individuals, it's 100% going to change your disposition and outlook in life.
Would think so.
And so I saw that David Goggins did this ultrasound run in Badwater, California, and it was to like Death Valley. And one of the things I thought was, and when I served with David Goggins, he wasn't thin like ultrasound runner. He looked like an NFL linebacker. And so one of the things that happened was I saw what he did, how he ran like this 160-mile run. And the beautiful part was he raised money for the time for a group called the Wounded Warriors Foundation. And so I was moved by that. And so I wasn't the athlete. I'm not a bad athlete, but I wasn't there's different levels to everything. I wasn't the athlete that Goggins is. But I figured if I trained my ass off, and the whole thing about people who aren't from Jersey might not realize that sometimes people from North Jersey or Central Jersey kind of have like this air of like arrogance about it towards people from South Jersey. I knew the decision makers were in New Brunswick regarding Rutgers, regarding my veterans advocacy. So I figured I'd try to connect it. And with you look at it like Gandhi, he had his march to the sea for salt. You look at Martin Luther King, he has March on Washington. So like physical feats and advocacy can go together. And so that's what I did. I had another veteran named Efric Gonzalez, Iraq veteran. So yeah, it was a kick. I think it was the first time that people kind of, it was kind of neat because I actually invited Adler to that as well. And I think that's really where I developed a friendship with him.
A lot is obviously going on in the world since 2001. The SEAL community that you've talked about, our special operations community, have really, truly been the tip of the spear. Now there are conflicts across multiple continents. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in one theater. Then you've got the Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in another, and in the third, you've got the Chinese continued aggression towards Taiwan, and our global force structure continues to evolve. You've been in the Navy, you've served in special operations. Things are the threats, I guess, that we're dealing with now as a country and as a military are maybe just a little bit different than the ones in Iraq and Afghanistan. What's your feeling on sort of the future of the Navy itself as we continue to face sort of different kinds of threats that we've faced, maybe in the last 20 years or so?
Well, number one, when I think about the Navy, you think about the majority of the planet Earth's populations are correspondingly in proximity very close to water, to large bodies of water. Think about the impact of maritime commercial traffic. It's huge. So I think it's vital that the Navy continues to evolve and play a big part. Now, I think the Navy, when I think of the Navy, I think of the New Jersey Battleship and what it's done, or it's presented an image of strength and resolve. And, it's been in over 19 battles. It's been in the Battle of Lafayette Gulf, the largest Navy battle in history, Battle of Philippines, another huge battle. And so it's had a huge impact. You think about from Lebanon, you think about the Persian Gulf, think about Vietnam. I first read about the New Jersey Battleship in a book called Men with Green Faces, and it talked about SEALs in Vietnam calling in for Navy gun support. And so it's played a big impact. And then I think about, well, Teddy Roosevelt and his White Fleet, and he had 16 battleships, and he basically sent an image of strength.
First USS New Jersey, the BB-16, was a part of Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet.
Yep. A lot of history. And I think we've made a mistake to realize that the truth is, I believe you're more likely to have peace when good men and women in democratic governments have strength. And I think when you show, in my opinion, I think the withdrawal in Afghanistan, where, you let Bagram Air Base fall first, and the way it happened, I think it sent a really bad signal. I thought it sent a really bad signal when in the Persian Gulf, I think it was in 2015, when those two Navy rigs were taken by Iran and they surrendered. I thought that was a bad signal. I thought we set a really bad signal when we basically lifted the restrictions on Iran and the sanctions on Iran. And now they were able to generate substantial capital to basically promote the proxies. And so I think we made a lot of big mistakes regarding our foreign policy. One of the things now, and I think it actually probably started when you think about the USS New Jersey, I think the first time we made a big mistake was after the bombings in the Lebanon and Beirut and the embassy and the Marine barracks. We had lost like over 300 U.S. service personnel, and we winded up pulling out. And that's where Hezbollah kind of winded up gaining control.
We lost the chief here on board during the barracks bombing. We had an ETC, Michael Georginski, who went over on land to help the Marines with some of their electronic equipment. And he ended up being there for too long and missed the last hop back to the ship. Said, I'll just sleep over and I'll come back in the morning. Well, the next morning was when the barracks blew up. So we lost one of our chiefs during that.
Well, Israel recently held one of the masterminds accountable, Abraham Agel, in September of this year. And so I think that, unfortunately, sometimes good men, good women, good nations have to do a hard thing. I don't think it's not academic to realize this. I believe in peace. I believe in the right to free speech. I believe that good men and women should be against war, but I also believe that there's a time for war. And unfortunately, we live in very turbulent times. And I think the right way forward is this: peace through strength. And I think that's the example the U.S. New Jersey set. And I'm hoping that's the example that, I think that's the right way to move forward.
Peace through strength. I mean, when you talk about the Battleship New Jersey, we were recommissioned for the fourth and final time as part of Ronald Reagan's 600 ship Navy, his vision for a 600 ship Navy. Obviously, as you mentioned, the battleship served off the coast of Lebanon. She was on station for 191 straight days. But when the battleship pulled up off the coast for the very first time, within 24 hours, there was a ceasefire. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, General P.X. Kelly, said at the time, there is no weapon system in the world that comes even close to the visible symbol of enormous power represented by the battleship. Now we're sitting on the battleship. There's obviously no more battleships, still in the active fleet. But it was a deterrence to our enemies.
Huge.
What can the United States do to, I mentioned just the three different conflicts, but, there are other ones happening around the globe, and I'm sure that will to come. With sort of that in mind, what can we be doing as a country, as a military, as a Navy, to sort of better prepare ourselves for those conflicts to come, and to really show that level of deterrence and that level of capability that will make China think twice before, looking to invade Taiwan or the next, hopefully never again, October 7th, or Russia invading Ukraine or something similar to that.
One of the reasons I think we were so successful in World War II was timing, the timing in when we entered. At the time, Germany's, is facing a very staunch Russian USSR opponent. And the Japanese were kind of overextended. And I think so timing is important. I think the building of coalitions is extremely important. I think it's been pretty successful in Ukraine. I think supporting our allies is important. I think that's to an extent been successful in Israel, sharing intelligence. One of the big issues I think within our own nation is academia. As I think in my experience at Rutgers, I found that there was, it wasn't a small crowd, in my opinion, that had a misplaced perspective on honorable military service. And even in the professional corporate world and in the legal communities, I think it's that way. And even in the political social class, you don't see a lot of veterans there and underrepresented. I don't know too many lawyer partners in big firms in New Jersey that are veterans, or judges that are veterans, or even elected officials that are veterans that have honorably served their country. And I think there's like a stigma to honorable military service. And one of the things, so I think that's something that has to be addressed. I'm trying to address it. I think the other thing is the real importance of technology. The state of you look at what's playing out in the Middle East. The use of drone warfare, cyber warfare, AI, very scary. And so I think it's extremely important that we really invest in technology. And one of the other things I've seen is the things that concerned me with COVID was the fact I looked at the recent successful brilliant ops against the leaders of Hezbollah with the cell phone, with the beepers.
Yep, absolutely.
And so they got into their supply lines. And then when I looked at what happened with COVID, and I looked at, a lot of the medications, and I realized that China has a huge, they're really infiltrated our supply lines to a point where I think it really endangers national security. And so I think that's really tightening up our supply lines is extremely important. I think, look, when you let spy balloons travel across the entire country and you shoot them down once they get in the Atlantic, I think that sends the wrong signal. And I think, sometimes it's not wrong to stand up and hold up, but also I think it's important to realize, look, we can't overextend ourselves. I think a lot of times we overextend ourselves and we get involved in things maybe we shouldn't get involved in. And I think I think our success rate's probably better when we kind of follow the Iranian model. And let's use other entities like we're using in Ukraine or Israel, and let's support those entities if at all possible, instead of having this huge American footprint.
I mentioned earlier in the intro when I was talking about your bio, about your role with the New York City SEAL Swim. And so I just wanted to share a little bit, have you share a little bit about it. Appreciate you inviting me this last year. Unfortunately, I had a family commitment. I wasn't able to come, but I'm very much looking forward to taking you up on it in 2025. Can you just tell us a little bit about what it is and how you got this idea and pulled off this really tremendous event with, not just Navy SEALs, but first responders, other military veterans, just, folks who believe in the cause, who decide to swim with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about the event and how it sort of all came together, and if you have any sort of plans for 2025?
So first, I want to thank you and your family for all you do for veterans, even before the battleship. And thank you for all your leadership of the Battleship New Jersey. Regarding the New York City SEALs, I believe in adventure therapy. Like I like to send the message of veterans out there kicking ass, names, and having a good time. I think we're all better that way. And that kind of reminds me, I remember when I met with Richard McCormick after an incident that happened at Rutgers, where they basically denied my free speech at the college Ave campus during an anti-military war protest there at the Vietnam Memorial. He had the decency to come meet with me. And my biggest proposal to him is like, hey, look how the NCAA did it, NCAAP did it with a lot of struggling African minorities and increasing their enrollment and graduation rates. Like they showed them how valuable education was. They actively sought to recruit them. And that's really what I try to do with veterans. Like I want more veterans in college. When I was a big veterans advocate at Rutgers, that's really what veterans in internships and businesses. Now, on the other side, for the SEAL community is a different animal than other veterans. Like we're very aggressive, we're high energy, and it's a beautiful thing when it's focused in the right direction. And so and we love adventure. Like being a SEAL, it's like you get addicted to like adrenaline rushes. And so and we're really good when we come together. And so I figured, you know what's cooler than swimming to the Statue of Liberty, doing 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups, honor our nation's freedoms and civil liberties, swimming to Ellis Island, doing 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups, honor all the men and women who came to our country for a better life, celebrate our nation's diversity, swim to South Cove Marina in Lower Manhattan, grab a bunch of American flags, hold them real high, and then run into the World Trade Center, do 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups to honor all those lost in 9/11. I knew when I put it out there, because I call it the SEAL Mafia, and like, you know, I knew when I put it out there, I wouldn't have a hard time. And it's just, when you have really good men and women with you, it's just easy to have victory after victory. And so I'm very grateful. We raised a lot of money, Navy SEAL Foundation now. I'm very proud to partner with them, millions of dollars. And we sent a real positive, patriotic message of unity that I think our whole country needs to see. So, yeah, I'm proud of it.
I'm assuming you don't have a date yet for 2020, but probably a little bit too early to start reading tide charts and currents and stuff.
Yeah, well, you're so right. So Navy SEAL Foundation and Liberty State Park and so many other entities would love for me to square down and do it right now, right? But you're right. Everything depends on the tides and currents. And right now, the estimated tides and currents are just not that accurate right now. So I try to make it the anniversary of Extortion 17. We lost a lot of SEALs that day, August 6th. That's actually 2001. That's actually 2011. That's actually one of the cool things we did on the Battleship.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yep. And in 2020 and 21, we came here and me and a bunch of SEALs, and we did shot off the guns. There was a famous SEAL named Stephen Topaz. We call him Turbo. He lost his leg in Afghanistan, and he actually shot the gun. You guys let him pull the trigger, but we read the names off of all the fallen. And because we actually started at Rutgers Camden at the Jeremy Kane Memorial, and because I wanted to give him some love, because we read his name with them, but that was a beautiful thing too. But yeah, I can't give you the date right now just because everything is dependent on the tides and currents. But it'll be a Saturday, one of the Saturdays in August, if possible, the closest I can get to August 6th.
We look forward to helping you promote that going forward. Certainly a worthy cause. Bill, I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you coming back to the Battleship. It's always great to see you. Anything else you wanted to add before we close this?
Yeah, something else did really cool that you helped me with, Marshall, was when I was the president of the Veterans Alumni of Rutgers University, we would have these cool Army Navy watch parties here on the Battleship New Jersey. Everybody had a great time. And also, we honored a Gold Star here named Jessica Trent, who lost her father on 9/11. We did a push-up salute for her. And so we, with your help, was able to do some good. I'm very grateful.
Bill, again, thank you for coming over to the Battleship. It's good to see you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your continued advocacy for our veterans community, because I think you're 100% right. If veterans are not going to look out for each other, then who's going to? But we here at the Battleship, that's certainly our central mission, and making sure that we do continue that education that you talked about, that patriotic education, and we make sure we remind people about the men and women who serve our country and who certainly have served here right on the USS New Jersey. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Morris.